Yes, I got it done and I kept it in only 2 parts. Even though I had a very embarrassing story to tell you guys, I could have easily broken this out into 3 parts. And I even said on Twitter, I was running across some issues and I was not going to let anything stop me. And I did it. It's done. The new Z170 classified motherboard from EVGA features 8-phase PWM, 4-way SLI support, along with top-notch components to offer gamers and enthusiasts more of what they want. A badass motherboard with no compromises. Click the link below to learn more. So anyway, if you guys have missed part 1, make sure you check that out. I'm putting the link down in the description for those watching on mobile too. That way you guys have something to click. I know you can't touch the screen and follow cards and stuff like that when they pop out. I don't think so. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Check out part 1 if you guys haven't already. This is part 2 here of my build of the Praxis wet bench from Primo Chill. They sent this over. It was a sponsored case build. But anyway, the words and stuff, obviously in this video, are going to be entirely my own, including the I digress, and I'm guaranteed to throw in here somewhere. Mostly because it triggers some of you, and that's the best part, honestly. So before I start being a rambler, man, I'm gonna go ahead and just let you guys watch the part that I know you're here to see. So we'll go ahead and get on with it right now. As you guys see, the build is done. I did some color mixing for the green, checking out a shade I want to use in Skunkworks and just seeing how it holds up before I do that. But anyway, I'm calling this build Toxicity, obviously because of the white and the green. Kind of looks like toxic sludge in there. Not only that, the color scheme is the same color scheme I have going for my phone here. Yeah, I use an iPhone, deal with it. But it's green and white, and I've had this case now for about a year. So as you can see, they match. They're like buddies. But anyway, it's just a phone. Who cares? God, stop being all triggered over what phone I use. Nerd. But building in the Praxis wet bench was pretty damn easy. I mean, it's open. It's an open test bench. Everything on top is accessible. It gives you plenty of room to reach underneath the motherboard if you need to. The standoffs are huge. That's the point of an open air test bench, is to make access really easy for those that have to do constant swapping out of parts and stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I went with flex tubing on this build and not rigid tubing as much as I wanted to. But I need to be able to get the water block off to change out CPUs and stuff if I want to do a CPU swap or a motherboard swap or whatever. It's a lot easier with flex tubing than it would be with hard tube, so that's why I did that. It's one of those things where a hard tube on this would have been overkill. Hell, water cooling of this nature with the laying DDC on there, the giant alpha cool reservoir and integrated top, triple EKPE radiator on there, Vardar fans, it's all such overkill, but who cares, man? I had the stuff, so why the heck not? And you guys know how much I love my water cooling builds. And I want to get back to doing some more of those videos. It's been a while since I've done like real diehard dedicated water cooling stuff. But we're back. We're back to it. But anyway, the Praxis wet bench here. I don't really have anything. Well, I have a couple things I want to say that aren't negative, but things that I would have liked to have seen a little bit different on there. But the cool thing about this wet bench is the fact that it's not like Primo just set out to make a test bench and this is their first run around. It's not their first rodeo whatsoever. That you can see that this case is a progression of wet benches that they've made in the past. They even had all acrylic ones, which looked fantastic. The problem was the durability of acrylic, as you guys know. They can break and crack and whatever else. That's why you need to also be careful with the inserts when you're putting them in. If you bend them, they will crack. It's pretty scratch resistant. Trust me, I've already tried to scratch it, not on purpose, but just when you build, things happen. And yeah, so anyway, it's pretty scratch resistant, very durable. But one thing to keep in mind is because it is a stamped steel and it is very rigid, it does bend and flex. So you want to keep that in mind. You don't want to go shoving the graphics cards down on the motherboard because you can warp and bow the actual motherboard tray, and keep that in mind. I mean, you can see here it's just flat metal. There's nothing really supporting it underneath the middle, just on the side. So you can't just go shoving stuff down on there and not expect bad things to happen. But as long as you go into it with that mindset, then you're going to be fine with that. The one thing I would have really liked to have seen would have been a place to mount a motherboard fan. And the reason being is when we're using a test bench and we're doing load sessions on graphics cards or long gaming sessions to test out whatever, or even CPU testing and overclocking, especially overclocking, you have to have air moving over the motherboard. Even though it's water cooled, yes, the CPU is water cooled, the VRMs, the MOSFETs, and the chipset are not water cooled. They usually rely on the airflow inside of a case to take away heat and move air over them, allowing some sort of semi-active cooling, if you will. But that doesn't exist on here. I'm fortunate. I have an overhead fan in here that does blow quite a bit of air down on this motherboard. But I'm still going to look at ways to perhaps mount a fan somewhere on here that's aesthetically pleasing, won't get in the way, and will allow me to control the airflow over the motherboard, especially when I run my shit overclocked all the time. Some test benches actually come with like a gooseneck fan that's on there that you can mount a fan to it, whatever fan you want, and it's flexible, so you can control where the airflow is. Move it out of the way when you're working on the motherboard, move it back when you want to do some active cooling. So I think that's something I would have liked to have seen integrated into this case. But other than that, it gives you tons and tons of mounting options. I chose to hang my hard drives underneath rather than putting them on the top. That way I could access my hard drives right here underneath the system without having to try and get in here or go in the side or whatever if they were mounted on the top side of the bottom panel. But it's flexible. You can do it however you want. You can mount it on the top, you can hang it, you can mount accessories in there, pumps, whatever you guys want. Even optical drives you can mount underneath here that's hanging. Obviously you guys can see I chose to put a little bit of like JDM underglow, if you will. But I love the fact that this is steel and not aluminum because it means I can use my magnetic lighting on there. So the fact that that's magnet, I just stick it up there and off we go. That's really cool. In fact, I can't do that with Skunkworks because it's an aluminum case and magnets don't stick to aluminum. But I love the fact that they also have integrated handles in here, and even they make it super obvious because it's got little like finger grooves on there. But I'm glad they did that, and it's making it obvious like, hey, grab it here when you move it, because as I showed you with the fact that this is flexible metal, you don't want to bend the thing by trying to pick it up, you know, right here or something like that. You will bend the shit out of it. So grab it where it's meant to be grabbed. It also gives you a pretty decent amount of access. You can get your whole hand back in there to access anything that you may have put in there. In my case, in my instance here, I actually put one of those SwiftTech PWM fan splitters that you would find in like one of their water cooling kits, like H220X, to control the Vardar fans that are on my radiator. But I also have 4 additional ports now available to me. So if I want to, 5. I have 5 additional ports available to me if I want to do some fan testing or whatever else, and PWM control over them as well. And there's lots of access to it. So I love the fact that it's kind of like a trunk, if you will. You can put all kinds of junk in there. And I think putting some lighting in there would have been cool, but I only had this one green light and I didn't want to do white. But that's not really all that important anyway. Yeah, the water cooling loop on here definitely is overkill, but that's kind of the point of it. It was a wet bench, so I thought I might as well do something custom with it. The green fluid on here, it's kind of funny. I put the pictures up on Instagram and Twitter, and I got a lot of questions of why green? Well, why green? Well, I think that's kind of a silly question. Why any color? Why red? Why blue? It's just a preference thing. I'm also testing this fluid, like I said, for skunkworks. But one of the reasons why I did green, I love green. I love green fluid, especially the pastel. It looks amazing. I've avoided green for years, especially on the YouTube channel, because I didn't want people being like, he's only doing green because he's such an NVIDIA fanboy, blah, 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 blah. I could have been doing a Razer theme, but still, if it's green, people automatically just assume you're an NVIDIA fanboy. Well, I wanted to avoid all that. Everyone calls me a fanboy now anyway, so I figured, why the hell not? Might as well at least go with the green. So now I'm going to have a green test bench, and I'm going to have a green main system. Deal with it. But like I said in part 1, I didn't use any of the front panel buttons on here because there's no point. Since I went back to the EVGA X99 classified, it's got motherboard mounted start and reset button or power and reset button, so there's no point. It'd be really redundant to run those cables and have to worry about wiring those when I can just touch it right here on the motherboard. But the two 980 Ti's on there, just because, really. There's no, it's a test bench. There's no point in putting SLI on there. I will be doing SLI testing though. In fact, these are on here because you guys were asking how two 980 Ti's versus like a 1080 or a Titan X would do. So we're gonna be doing that, obviously. I said on Twitter today that something happened that actually set me back to where this video almost didn't get done today. And I want to talk about that real quick. And in fact, it has nothing to do with the test bench, wet bench whatsoever. It actually has everything to do with the power supply. As you guys know, again, in part 1, I showed you I'm using the Gigabyte 1200 watt Gaming Extreme. Yes, guys, they've made a power supply with the name gaming on it. But anyway, it's a fully modular power supply. And I'm used to power supplies that are very, very diligent on the way that the modular plugs are keyed so that they only go in certain ports. I'm sure you guys can already tell where this is going. In the hustle and bustle of building a system like this and trying to get it done, I wasn't paying attention and I plugged one of the EPS 8-pin power plugs into the PCI Express 6+2 power on the back of the power supply. That should have never been allowed. I've never had a case come in here that allowed me to take an EPS 8-pin and plug it into a PCI Express, because the reason for that is the 12 volt and the ground on those are reversed. They are different. And when you reverse polarity something like ground and 12 volt on a power supply with components, you typically get magic blue smoke. Fortunately, I didn't get that. When I turned it on, it immediately tripped the internal breaker inside the power supply, which won't reset until you unplug power. Tried to turn it on 2 or 3 times. It kept tripping. I finally traced all my wires thinking something got pinched or whatever by a process of elimination of unplugging things and trying to start it. After about trying to start it 6 or 7 more times, apparently me trying to kill my system, I eventually realized that one of my EPS 8 pins, because I'm running 2 on here, was plugged into a 6+2 PCI Express. Should have never been allowed. So the moral here, guys, if you have a modular power supply, make sure and double check that you guys don't have it plugged into the wrong port, because a really good power supply manufacturer would never allow that to happen. Obviously, some do allow that to happen. So you definitely want to make sure that you don't do that. That's actually how I killed an old Pentium D system once. Yeah, I share my mistakes with you guys. That way you can learn from my mistakes and we can all laugh at me. Because I'm fortunate enough to where if I blow this up, I have spares and I can keep moving forward. You guys remember when I drilled holes in a motherboard? Anybody remember that? Thought I was doing something custom. Turns out all I was doing was forcing you guys all to watch me murder components. But anyway, I'm fortunate to where I could move on. But I thought I actually blew up my 980 Ti's. And it's funny because I couldn't get the system to post after I corrected my problem. Thought I killed the graphics card. And what ended up happening is about 15 to 20 attempts to post this system later, I finally got it to turn on. Most people would have thought they killed their system and tried to RMA something, or just assumed it was bad because I was getting boot loops, I was getting no video error, I was getting every light on the motherboard to light up like a Christmas tree. All signs pointed to dead CPU or graphics card, or both. But through a particular technique that I know to get dead hardware to kind of reset itself, I was able to get it back alive. And there was one point where I got one 980 Ti to work and not the other one. Obviously now I've got both of them working, as you guys can see. I would have loved to have made a video about it. I was in too much of a pinch to make a separate video about that. And it's not the kind of thing that I can force to happen to show you my methods for reviving dead hardware. I promise if it happens again in the future, I will do a video on it. But yeah, it ended up taking me a couple of hours to get the system back alive. which really kind of sucked. And then Windows didn't want to boot after that. Obviously, we are past that because as you guys can see, the system is completely booted. But anyway, I digress, guys. The last thing I want to talk about here real quick is some folks ask me how I feel about this being used as like a daily driver case. The only concern I would have are two things. One of them I already touched on is the fact that there is no motherboard airflow whatsoever because it's an open air test bed. So unless you have some sort of a stand fan next to it or something blowing air on it too, I would be concerned about long gaming sessions, long rendering sessions and stuff without the VRMs, MOSFETs, and the chipset being cooled in some way. The other thing is there's no dust control, so you need to keep that in mind. In a case, you have fan filters, you can do positive pressure, there's things you can do to minimize the amount of dust. This here is just sitting here saying, please dust, rain on me, just cover me with your filth. Anyway guys, time to go. Thanks for watching. My new test bed is up and running. I've got lots of graphics cards I gotta check out. I've got the RX 470, the RX 460, I've got the 1080 classified. I don't know what else. I'm sure there's more out there I've forgotten, but got lots of shit to get done and little time to do it. So it's time to go. Thanks for watching, guys. Give this video a like if you liked it. Dislike it if you didn't like it. Feel free to call me an NVIDIA fanboy because of all the green. I don't really care. Shoot. Green was around long before NVIDIA. Unless Jensen invented green too. Then does that mean Razer has to pay NVIDIA royalties on green? These questions have to be answered. I'm gonna get to the bottom of it. All right, guys. We'll see you later.